right on the final corner. This is my last opportunity to send an overtake into P4. Will I be able to do it? Right, it's Monday morning, which means it's the daily race rotation. So going into sports mode, we are presented with a fresh daily race A, B, and C. So we have Goodwood, Gardens, and Kyoto. Going into Goodwoods, me being me, I'm gonna ignore daily race B as usual, because I usually don't like them. Now, pretty much bang in the starting procedure, we're driving the R31 Skyline, which is a pretty rare car to see. So as the clock starts ticking, it's lights out and away we go. Heading straight into the race with pretty much no practice. Is gonna be interesting how I'm gonna adapt on the fly, especially with such an old car with very bouncy suspension. Goodwood is quite tight, which makes it even harder to race this car. So starting in 5th place heading into turn 1, it won't be long till I make my first mistake, which is being a bit too confident and then being pushed out wide, which is no big deal. I'm not in the wall, so I'm just gonna correct myself and go back on track. However, the mixed terrain between asphalt and grass makes it a little bit harder to go back on track since you don't really know what you're gonna do. So I was a bit more cautious than usual there. Losing about 4 positions, I'm back into P9 now. And me being me, which is such an aggressive driver, I'm gonna try to redeem myself at the first opportunity that presents itself. So it's only a matter of time before I either overtake someone or disaster happens, which means I'm overconfident on a track I have zero experience on. So going into this long right-hander, you can see how I'm pretty much pushing the car as much as possible and then being a bit late on the brake and then once again being pushed out wide. And then mentally I was like, right, that's it, the race is over. So going into the next race, with a bit more practice and fairly higher track knowledge, I feel fairly confident about my chances this race. With a better qualifying lap, I'm starting P3 this time. So as the clock starts ticking, it lights out and away we go. Immediately switching to the external view, the R31 GTR is actually quite a nice looking car, a fairly underrated car compared to its descendants. So going immediately back into action, you can see going through turn 1, the two drivers ahead going side by side and fighting each other, which gives me an opportunity to invite myself and then almost knocking myself out of the race. However, I kept my composure and corrected myself and getting straight back into it. Now the French driver behind is getting very close and then proceeds to give me the bump draft, indicating that he wants to work together, which is something I always find welcome. However, I don't trust French people. They always attack when you least expect them to. So while taking his invitation, I'm also being very cautious about it. So going through this section of corners in style, I'm catching up to the two drivers ahead, which means the French person has been helping me out somewhat, given that he's bump drafted me at least a couple of times. Now, the battle of the lead being a 4-way, it's not gonna be an easy fight, to be fair, because driving a car fast is one thing. However, avoiding 4 cars is another thing, which for you, the viewer, means better racing, but for me means tougher racing. But despite my heart rate increasing and me sweating a little bit, I always invite a challenge. So with the pack being a little bit more spread, it gives me a bit more breathing room. However, it's gonna compress back again into the last corners, because these cars get a very big advantage from the draft. So heading to the final set of corners at 190 km an hour, reaching 200. I smashed hard on the brakes, nailing my braking spot, and then proceeding to go for an early apex, trying to get an edge on the driver ahead. I just about went off track and slightly bumped the driver, which led him to spinning out. Which, to be fair, is my mistake, but incidents like these happen. Once again, with the French driver being very close behind. Now it seems that his patience has run out, and telling by the body language of the car, he's very eager to overtake me. And once again, although he invited me to work together, there will be a point where he no longer wants to work together and he's gonna send an overtake down my inside without my knowledge. It's all about the element of surprise, and by far it's the best tactic to ever do. Now heading into this right hand, as the pack seems to slightly compress, as I utilize every single inch of the track, with each and every one of us getting slightly closer to each other. Now this is the power of the draft. Depending on category, the draft can either be good or bad, but in a straight line, the draft is always good and will get you closer together. Now once again, it's clear the French driver does not want my cooperation. In his eyes, the pack is tight enough where he could overtake me and use the draft of the car ahead. So he's definitely desperate to overtake me as soon as possible. And then with me going semi-defensive into this right-hander, I did not expect an overtake. However, he does it, further proving the effectiveness of the element of surprise. Now he establishes the lead over me on the area of the track where I suck the most. As you can see, the correction due to my mistake. And by far, this is where I struggle with the most. I just don't have enough confidence on the brake pedals to throw the car in there. So now skipping forwards a little bit, as we go through the final section of the track, here is the part where I'm best at. Once again, utilizing every inch of the track. Here you don't have to be as aggressive on the brake, as it's a slower section of the track. So going into my favorite corner where I seem to find the most space, I seem to catch up to both drivers in this one singular corner, with me by far getting the better exit over here. Now I'm once again back in the mix, going alongside the French driver. That corner alone is one of the most crucial corners on the track, as it leads to a high-speed section of the track. With the French driver not wanting to give up his position, it's gonna be a little bit tight as we go side by side. And as always, rubbing is racing. However, he does seem to push me off the track, but it's nothing too major and I go back immediately on it. Now we're in this situation once again. The longer we fight, the farther the driver ahead is. So both of us want to get rid of each other as soon as possible, with my goal being overtaking him and disappearing, and his goal is not losing too much time while defending me. So sitting right in his draft, I am looking to set up an overtake into the corner ahead, which is again one of my weakest corners of this track, so it's going to require a bit of bravery. And going to the braking point, you can see me making a tiny mistake, going slightly off the track, not too much major, and then both of us gaining ourselves a 0.5 penalty. Now luckily for me, he seems to have made a bit of a mistake going off the track, which means I'm gonna get a little bit closer to him. And then going into the braking zone of the corner ahead, I slightly miscalculated my braking point, leading to me going wide on the track. Being on the section full of rubble with nearly no grip, I almost go off the track. However, I do hold my composure. Now he's won this battle, but I have not lost the war yet. So my goal now is to regain the time that I lost and then attacking him again. However, going into turn 1, I misjudged my speed and then I go a bit too wide, leading to a half spin, and then having to use all my experience in sim racing to correct myself and not doing a full spin. So I managed to regain control of the car, and then now I'm gonna redirect the car back on track and hopefully catching to the pack up ahead. However, a lap later, that does not seem to be the scenario, as a result of another mistake I made. So now we have the bridge driver overtaking me and pretty much flying into the distance. However, I'm not one to give up easy, so I'm gonna try everything in my power to catch him by the end of the lap. So now once again, for the final time, heading into the final set of corners before the checkered flag. Other drivers have crossed the finish line and now it's up to me to finish before he does. With him being about a second ahead, now it's down to the wire and me using every single bit of the track possible, utilizing every single tactic I know in sim racing to push the car as fast as possible towards the checkered flag. And once again, it's down to the wire to the final corner. I executed perfectly, leaving no margin of error and jumping on the tail of the driver ahead. Now with mere meters separating me and the checkered flag, it's gonna be a photo finish of me and the driver being side by side, both of us desperately pushing towards the checkered flag to cross it first. And now back in the replay, once again going side by side, it seems that I just made it with mere milliseconds separating me from the driver behind.
Oh my lord! Wow! 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 That was a clutch, that was a clutch. Woo! Wow, that got my adrenaline up. My heart rate is like right around. I know, but it's beating fast. Wow.
Now with my live reaction, we head up into the next race, driving in Kyoto with the GR4 cars. Now once again, I had no experience on the track. Last time I've driven that track was in 2022. So to say I was rusty is an understatement. So as the starting procedure goes on, the car starts rolling towards the start finish line. Now this track is a unique combination between very tight corners and very free-flowing corners.
Right, so pretty much have no confidence in the car, but to succeed in something, you have to jump off a cliff and build a plane on your way down. Quote.
Dropping the hardest quote just before starting the race. As the cars line up, the clock starts ticking, it slides out, and away we go. Now let's do a small recap. The McLaren is a car that I have not driven in a couple of months, and this track is one that I have not raced on in 2 years to be exact. So once again, saying I'm rusty is an understatement. So going into turn 1, you have to ride the brakes and trial brake as much as you can. You need to get that perfect angle where your car starts leaning in towards the apex, and then you have to push out, sort of like an orbit. And to be fair, with how long these corners are, it does feel like orbiting a space shuttle. And now into this section, you need to keep the throttle pinned down. However, you do need to be very accurate with your steering inputs. The less steering, the better you do here. You need to stick to the inside of every corner as much as possible. And if you steer too much, you're just gonna end up in the barriers. Now into this corner, it's pretty much the same as the last one. However, you have a higher top speed, so you need to be a little bit more accurate with the throttle. Once again, orbiting around the apex as if you're a NASA astronaut, you have to be very smooth with the throttle application and braking application. Now here is my favorite and least favorite section at the same time. It feels like a roller coaster as you're going downhill. You go hard on the brakes and then you have a very sharp section where once again you have to be super accurate while being very aggressive. Now here's my issue. I don't have enough confidence in the brakes, so I end up going a bunch slower than I would optimally be able to. Now again, to you it may seem like I'm pushing the absolute limit on there. However, every driver knows the feeling where you feel like you could push even harder. And I felt that feeling big time over there. So going into this hairpin, once again my issue is trail braking. Now if you keep an eye on my braking gauge, you can see that it's very jittery. And that's an issue with my pedal I've been facing constantly into every race I do. And since I'm flat broke as it stands, I cannot afford an upgrade. So going into the second very tight section of the track, again you have to be very accurate while having a lot of confidence on the brake, which I don't seem to have. Now overtaking a car here as it made a mistake, we're heading into the final corner of the track where you basically have to copy the hairpin before. However, the braking distance is way shorter as you're going uphill. And now we completed the lap with overtaking one car. Pace-wise, I'm very close to the drivers. However, I have this internal feeling that tells me I could do way better. And right now, as I'm reviewing this replay, I can do way better on the braking. So, planned upgrades are coming soon. However, I don't know when they're gonna happen. Hopefully by the end of this month. Because I know I have the capability to face the best of the best drivers of this game. And even in real life, I know I have the capability to face the best of the best drivers. So now, skipping about a lap ahead, I've caught up slightly with the drivers ahead, and then I seem to try something new and be a bit more confident on the brakes. And it seems like that sort of works and decreased the gap to the driver's head. So now I'm slowly getting closer bit by bit to the drivers as I catch in the draft. And now that I established myself in the pack, it's a matter of time before I'm able to overtake each and every one of them. Because right now I'm going through the analyze and adapt process. So now as we head into the first hairpin, I try to send one down the inside, but he seems to immediately block it and then me nearly pushing him off the track. but he corrects himself and he doesn't spin. So that's again one of the many instances that could go really wrong, but thankfully didn't, as I don't want to ruin my sportsmanship points. So now you can see me using every single inch of the track and the driver up ahead getting a penalty while I don't. And this is why you have to learn the car. Because the car up ahead did 3 wheels off the track, he got a penalty. However, I kept 2 wheels on the track, which didn't get me a penalty. Now this is information I learned thanks to Carl. And if you don't know who Carl is, you clearly don't watch the Gran Turismo finals, because he made it to one of their championships there. However, I cannot recall which one. He's one of the many people I met at Yasuhit Esports. And it's always useful to have someone you can look up to, especially in your own field. Now, as the car ahead serves its penalty, I go side by side with it into turn 1. Which again feels like an orbit, and it seems that I've went slightly wide, which invites him to go on the inside and then get the overall better line, which is otherwise known as a switcheroo. So with me nearly going off the track, I go back into his draft and try to keep it composed and nice and tight. Sitting tightly in the slipstream, I don't want to lose the draft because this means I will not be able to catch up to the pack ahead. Because as I know, the Supra is one of the fastest cars on a straight line, so having the slipstream is very useful. And now going into the second orbital corner, I seem to not have made a mistake here and seem to have taken it very nicely, in fact better than the driver up ahead. However, with the Supra being a very fast car, the gap does not seem to decrease by much. But I'm still in his slipstream, which means I will catch up to him bit by bit. So I just want to keep it tight and composed, because if I make a silly mistake, I'm not going to be able to catch up at all. Because this is what people would call a slipstream train, where every car is split by about 7/10 of a second. Which means everyone is in range of each other, but no one is overtaking one another because of how more difficult it is to overtake in the slipstream. And now you can see that Supra made a silly mistake, so that invites me to make an overtake, which I seem to take the outside and try to go for the switcheroo. However, I do seem to take a very interesting line, which leads to me going off track and then spinning.
No. Yeah, well, I do have some issues with race quitting, so everyone.